What is up, everyone? Welcome to our first session of building a full stack web app. Today, we're going to be doing front-end design with HTML and CSS. So before we get started on our content, I would like to introduce our speakers. So let's go ahead and bring them on stage. Give me one moment. All right. So first, for those who don't know me, I'm Alex. I'm the president of the UCF Developer Student Club. I'm pumped to be here with you all today. So let me have Maria introduce herself next.
Hey guys, my name is Maria. I am the tech lead, and I'll be the one who's going to be introducing to you HTML and CSS. And now I'm going to introduce Antoine Gordon.
Hello, everyone. My name is Antoine Gordon. I'm also excited to teach everyone, and hopefully to have a wonderful day.
All right, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so before we actually get started on the content itself, I do want to introduce what DSCs are. What are we about? What do we do? So developer student clubs are student-run communities that are supported and recognized by Google developers that empower students through programs like these on the slide, which is developer student clubs, Google developer groups, which are pretty much like developer student clubs, but for students and professionals. There's also Google developer experts, women tech makers, and a lot of other programs that Google sponsors. The objectives for DSCs is to help students bridge the gap between theory and practice. But what does that mean? In our classes, we learn a lot about theory or concepts, but oftentimes we don't apply those to real-world problems. And that's what we're here for. Through your participation in DSC events, you'll learn a lot about cutting-edge technologies and platforms that you can use in real-world applications. We want to help you through peer-to-peer learning. Remember that this is a student-run community, and we want you to reach out, ask any questions, and if you need help, we'll be happy to help you if you're stuck. This way, you can meet new people, build projects together, and at the end of the day, that is the goal for DSC. We want you to learn and enjoy today's event. So a quick overview of today's schedule. We already met our speakers, and I just introduced what DSCs are. Now let me go ahead and get into what we're going to be building during today's series. So what are we building? Before I talk about what we're going to be building throughout this series, let me go ahead and quickly talk about the 2021 Solution Challenge. So the 2021 Solution Challenge mission is to create a solution for one of the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, using at least one Google technology. So in our project, we've decided to develop a very easy, basic solution that aims at solving issues around SDG Goal 6, or clean water and sanitation. Before I move forward, I just wanted to mention, if you want to check out the 2021 Solution Challenge page, the link is on our resource doc. If someone could please drop that link into the chat for our resource doc, that would be super helpful. If you didn't get it, I also sent it out via email if you did RSVP. But the 2021 Solution Challenge page is there where you can register, get resources, learn more about these SDGs. Additionally, we did just run a workshop yesterday as part of the Solution Challenge design series to do problem identification. So to help people look at these and identify problems within these 17 goals. So the web app we'll be developing by the end of this series is called Clean Water, which helps users create events for beach cleanups around Florida. Users will be able to RSVP, create new event listings, add event details, log in and out, create an account, and reset their password. So we admit that this app is not really in any way unique because this functionality already exists in other platforms like Facebook groups, Meetup, and other platforms. So this project might not have a great chance at winning the solution challenge, but we use this because it's a great example project for us to create for those of you who are creating a web app for the first time. It's very simplistic. There's a very short list of features, and it should be very easy to understand how this web app functions. Also on the resource doc, I linked the URL to Freshwater, which is a nonprofit organization, and their website design kind of spiked our interest and kind of gave us inspiration for what our website would look like. So when Maria's ready, we can go ahead and introduce HTML, which is the big bulk of the content today, and then CSS, which is styling those HTML elements, then Bootstrap, which is something that can help us with our CSS. And once we introduce all of those topics, we will get started in VS Code. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and bring Maria on the screen so she can introduce HTML. All right, Maria, you can go ahead and take it away.
Awesome. Okay, so first question about what is HTML? Well, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It's a standard markup language for webs, and HTML elements are built into blocks of HTML pages. These elements are represented by tags. So let's see some examples. Okay, so here are some examples that this is the base structure for your website that we're going to be building in today. The first one you have is a doc type, which defines the document as the HTML. Underneath it, we have the root element of the HTML tag, which is the element that embodies all elements in the page inside the tag, which also defines the primary language English of a website. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but when you log in to certain websites, if like, let's say you're in another country, the site will automatically change to whatever language you are located in that country. Okay, next we're gonna go into the meta, which contains the information of the document, which is defining the character set. And then underneath is our title tag, which the title tag is a document which normally is displayed on the browser of the top of the page. Then we have the body tag, which is our element HTML document, which is basically the juicy part of the website. It's like a burger, but it's really yummy. Okay, and then you're gonna notice the display and contain of the opening and closing tag. Inside the body, we're gonna have the header, which is the largest type of header. In top of the title display of the page. Then next, we're gonna have the two paragraph, which is the main text in which you choose to display the article content. When we finish the doc and the closing body tag and closing HTML, you're gonna see it on the screen. For those of you who have never touched HTML before today, do not get overwhelmed. Just follow along. It's a lot of information to learn in one day. And you're right, it might get overwhelming, but you don't need to memorize every tag or the exact tag. We also have some awesome resources like W3 Schools as a reference website when we get things wrong. This is like my Bible. No matter how advanced you get, you will always be checking documentation and code examples online while you develop your own design. Okay, so now we're gonna go into what is CSS, which is called the Cascading Style Sheet. This is basically what I call and describe the document in the markup language. In other words, it tells the browser how to style the elements in colors, fonts, spacing, and sizing, and much more. Most of it is a well-designed website uses very long style sheets to style their inner code. If it wasn't for each CSS, all of the styles would be written inside the HTML document, which makes our code very unorganized and bulky. CSS uses the ability to use styling in a mold, in a molder way when we can switch between style sheets and we please without having to change our HTML elements in a very much in very much. Basically, HTML is going to be what makes the website look pretty, attractable to the user. Okay, so this is how the CSS is going to look once we integrate it to the HTML. CSS has a rule of sets that consists the selector and the declaration block. The selector points to the HTML element, what you want to style it. Then you have the declaration block that contains more or one declaration separated by semicolon. Each declaration includes the CSS property, name value, and separated by the column. For example, in the picture I show you, the body is the selector, the background is the property, and the light blue in the screen is the property value, which is gonna make the body of the website look blue. Now we're gonna go into Bootstrap. So Bootstrap is done easy, sort of. I know we're taking a lot right now, as you see, but Front Bootstrap is an open source framework for front end web design. The framework is basically a design without having to start from square one. Designing your web page styles from scratch using pure CSS can be both long and frustrating. Bootstrap is here to make your life easier. So, unfortunately, Bootstrap is not very clear on the documentation of the website when we work with our code, but there's a couple of snippets that we've provided that's going to modify it and make it very easy for you to understand. Okay. So as you can see on the screen, we have a little sample of how we are going to provide you with a template of Bootstrap. As you can see in some of the lines, you're going to have in one of the meta tag, which is the white device part, which is the width page that allows your screen to show the width of the device. Below that, you're going to see next to the width, you're going to see the scale, which is basically the zoom level, how the browser is going to load, whether it's on a browser, an iPad, or an iPhone. Bootstrap also requires a containing element which wraps the site contents. So there are two classes in the container. One is the dot container class that provides a responsive fix in the container, and the other is going to be the container fluid class, which provides the entire width of the viewport. I'm going to show you below in the next slide what Bootstrap looks like in columns and rows for those containers. Okay, so you're going to see there in the next example, Bootstrap basically is a system built with flex boxes that allows up to 12 columns across the page. It's going to divide the pages into rows and columns. No matter the screen size, it's always going to be broken down in 12 columns. As you can see in the example, all of those columns could be extra small, medium, or large. Okay. So
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pick off here and go ahead and talk about how do we design a website before we start coding it. So now that we talked about all of these technologies, HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap, you might be asking, how do we design a website before we're actually coding it? And this is where a graphics editor like Figma comes in. Figma lets you design and prototype web and mobile app UIs in a simple drag and drop way. Best part is students get Figma for free. If you want to get your free pro license, go ahead and click the link in the resource doc. It's listed as students and educators receive a pro license from Figma for free. Go ahead and click that link and apply for your free pro license and you can use it. It's pretty awesome. But I do want to put a disclaimer out there that you don't need to use a fancy editor like Figma, and there's other editors like Adobe, but you don't need to do it in such a fancy way, especially when you're just getting started out with web design. You could even draw out your design on paper. It doesn't have to be digital in order to start coding. You just need to have a general idea about what you're about to develop, before you start getting into VS Code, because if you just jump into VS Code, sometimes it can be frustrating. You don't really have much of a sense of direction, and by the end, it might come out a little bit different than you expected. So again, I'm going to go ahead and just show this picture, and then we're going to jump into Figma actually. But this is a quick screenshot of our Figma design of what we'll be creating today in HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap. So this is a critical step before jumping into VS Code, like I said, especially when you're working on a team. If you and your team doesn't have a tangible design to reference when building your web app, your team is not going to be on the same page. No pun intended. So let me give you a quick look of our Figma design in Figma before we jump into VS Code. But we aren't really going to dive into how to use Figma today, as it's outside of the scope of this workshop. But there are some great Figma tutorials on YouTube that you can watch to get started with your designs, should you choose to go with Figma. So let me go ahead and bring my screen down and then show you Figma. Okay, so here's Figma. I'm actually going to take my face off the screen and show you what Figma looks like. So what's nice about Figma, everything is drag and drop. It's very, very simple to use on all operating systems. It is web-based, but they also do have a desktop version of the application. It is exactly like the web version. It is powered by something called Electra, I believe. So all the features, buttons, everything is the same, but the desktop version is a little bit more stable. It is free, included in that Pro license that you can get from Figma. So what we're going to be focusing on today is the home page. So this is basically a quick look at that home page. So we have obviously a nav bar here at the top with links to other pages that we've created. We have some styled text for a logo. We got buttons to join and sign in. Join the cause button, a place where you can search the existing events that have already been created, and then all of the events that have already been created here in a list. And then at the end of the list, there will be a button where you can click create an event. Potentially later in our series, we'll have like a dialog box that pops up and lets you enter details to create a new event. And then we have like a quote footer image here at the bottom, just to kind of spice things up. We also have a footer with our information, with a fake email and fake number. But on a normal website, you're going to have this. You're going to have the name, contact number, and email, maybe potentially links to their social media, and then some type of copyright message of some kind. I'm not going to break down all of the other pages, but we have the who we are page, the get involved, and then we also have forgot password, sign up, and a login page, just that looks just like this. All of these pages that we've created are already in our GitHub repo. If you want, you can go ahead and download our GitHub code from our repository. It's linked in the resources doc that we handed out. It is listed as GitHub repository session 1. You can either clone it or you can download the zip. So let me go ahead and just quickly show you how to do that before we get started. I'm going to jump out of Figma and go to GitHub. So this is what our GitHub looks like. The link takes you to our session 1 branch here on GitHub. If you know how to use Git on the command line, then you should already know how to clone a repo. And you can click code and then copy it and then clone it using the command line if you have Git installed. If you don't have Git installed, it's pretty easy. All you can do is you can download the entire repo as a zip, and you can play with single files as needed, or use the entire folder and plug it into VS Code. So let me go ahead and bring the slides back up. So we jumped into Figma, and now that we've seen our design, let's get coding. What I mentioned earlier in the presentation, or I mentioned earlier via email to everyone who RSVP'd, to download VS Code, which is the code editor of our choice for this event today. You can install VS Code for free on Windows, Mac, and Linux. VS Code operates the same exact way on all platforms. so everyone will be able to follow along regardless of what system you're using. I also requested that you download the live server extension and change to settings, which are it's going to make your life a lot easier when you're coding during the session. Just so you know, before you download the extension, live server is what enables us to run what's called a local server that serves web pages for us to look at while we're coding. This is super helpful, so you're gonna need it when you're following along. Also, the format on save settings will make your life a lot easier when it comes to formatting HTML code, as HTML has a lot of indentations when you're nesting elements inside of each other. So please check out our resource doc again, which has the name of the live server extension we'll be using and the name of the two settings that we'll be needing for today. So that is the end of our presentation. We are going to go ahead and jump into VS Code now. I'm going to go ahead and pull up our screen share, and Maria is going to walk us through how we're going to create the homepage that we designed in Figma using HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap. Again, I want to mention this. If we go too fast or you need to reference the source code, that's why we made our GitHub repository. You can see every single line of code that we're going to be typing out here today. So if you miss something, please go ahead and pull up the repo. You can copy and paste certain parts, mess around with them yourself, and we'll go from there. If you have any specific questions on why we did anything, please drop those into the chat and I can have Maria answer those. And yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. Open up VS Code and let's get rolling. I'm going to go ahead and drop the slides off of the stream and go ahead and add VS Code now. And I'm going to go ahead and bring Maria on. And while I have Maria on, before we go ahead and get started, we have a question that just says, well, first, there's one question is, let's see, with the format on save option, there are two options in the dropdown, file and modifications. Which one do we choose? That's a great question. It should be file. That's the way that I have it set up. So on the format on save mode, it should be file. That way, when you save the file, it formats the code inside of that file. Great question. There's another question, which might be more for Maria, is what is the best way to learn CSS?
So the best way to learn CSS, like for me, I came from learning pure CSS. I didn't know, like back in 2007, I learned CSS. Uh, what helped me the most was using W3 schools, but also just playing around with myself. Like I started from scratch before I jumped into Bootstrap 4. I went into a simple, like just had body H1, and we're gonna show you how to link the style cascade sheet. But I started adding IDs and classes to my header, body, paragraph, and just play around with it to see, like, okay, this is what this does. It's a lot, but you just play around with it and you get to learn little by little. Or you can also go to the 2-3 schools, YouTube, and tutorials. um, the best one that I've used so far is W3 schools and Bootstrap and Treehouse. So those resources are very good to learn
Awesome.
pure CSS.
Perfect. Thanks for answering that, Maria. So without further ado, we can go ahead and jump into VS Code. I do want to say, if anyone has any questions, again, drop them into the chat, and I will go ahead and ask Maria the question so that she can answer for you. So I'm going to go ahead and bring VS Code back up. I'm dropping off, but I'm still here, of course, just backstage. And let's go ahead and get started.
Okay, guys. So we're gonna first import the iDoc HTML, which is gonna be the HTML doc type. Okay, and then we're just gonna do the basic HTML lang English tag. Then we're gonna add the head. And then inside the head, we're gonna go ahead and put the required meta tags, which is gonna be the meta tag for the Bootstrap, which is gonna be the mobile first. I'm just gonna go ahead and quickly put them in there. It's gonna be this one. We're gonna go ahead and put the other second meta tag. Okay. Then from there, you can guys go ahead and put a title, which is gonna be clean water. Okay, it's gonna be clean water. We're gonna go under the head and we're gonna put body. Okay, and inside there, I'm gonna put like, it's gonna be a little bit overwhelming, but I'm just gonna insert it in there. And you guys, I'm gonna give you like 5 minutes to type it. It's gonna be basically the navigation bar. So I'm gonna go ahead and import it. It's a little bit like overwhelming, but I'm gonna go one by one and how we're gonna type it. I'm gonna also try to see if we can copy that whole code and put it on the comments to see if you guys need to copy it. Okay, so hopefully that was, I think they're gonna drop it in case you guys are like, oh my God, I have to type everything out. So I'm gonna go each line by line. So line 10 in the screen, it's basically the nav class. It's gonna say nav bar and it's gonna explain like how long is it, the color, and the ID. I'm gonna go open the live server so you guys can see how it looks. I'm not sure she's gonna show. I think we got disconnected. I think we got disconnected, so give us a moment. Okay, so as you guys see, it's gonna say the title, clean water, then who we are, what we do, get involved, sign up, login. So that's the basically the nav bar, clear and empty without the bootstrap. So we're gonna go ahead.
Can you make that a little bit bigger, Antoine, so they can see the components that are on that live server page? Perfect. So while Maria's getting quickly set, just to give everyone a brief overview of what we just did. So we went ahead and copied in our complete nav component or element into our doc. That nav element is in our GitHub. It's a lot. And the reason why it's all kind of it's pretty long is because we're using Bootstrap at this point, but we haven't actually imported Bootstrap yet. So none of the styling has taken place. Everything is very unstyled, very standard, just links and two unstyled buttons. So next, Maria, you can go ahead and take it and then maybe explain how we can import Bootstrap and then where people can go to look at documentation for the Bootstrap.
Okay, so now we are gonna go back into our CSS Visual Studio. See if it's showing. Okay, so as you can see, I just added this in line 10 again. I'm gonna highlight it. I just added the Bootstrap. Okay. For that, you're gonna go into your browser and you're gonna go to Bootstrap. You can either Google it, put Bootstrap, Bootstrap 4. And then you can go ahead, you can either copy the Bootstrap from our GitHub that we dropped down, or you can go actually to the side Bootstrap. You're going to go into the introduction. Let me just open up a internet so you guys can see where I'm going to be copying it. Give me one full second.
I can share my screen real quick, Maria. I have it up.
If you can, yeah.
All right, so here we go. Here's the this is the page for Bootstrap. Something to keep in mind is in the top right-hand corner, this is showing you the documentation for which version of Bootstrap you're using. There is version 5 available. I believe it's an alpha right now. I could be wrong. When we tried to use version 5 of Bootstrap, we did have some issues when it came to the navigation bar specifically. We were having some issues with the syntax, so we went ahead and stuck with what is already pretty well known in the Bootstrap community, which is Bootstrap 4. 4.6 is the latest version of 4. And the way you can get Bootstrap in is you can go ahead and copy basically a link to this CSS style sheets. And then we can get their jQuery, which runs some of the Bootstrap elements that we'll be using in the document. So you can literally just click the copy button to copy it to your clipboard from the page, and then put it into your code. And then now, hopefully, that kind of understands where we're getting some of these elements and then dropping them into VS Code. We're not just making them up; they definitely come from somewhere. And then you can also check out the components. And components lets you look at a bunch of different things: styles, colors, buttons, cards, forms, navs, everything you can think of when it comes to HTML is on this site. And you can see syntax. Basically, you can see examples and then how you would code something like that. And this is how we got started with our code. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to Antoine's live server, and then Maria can continue with explaining how we have the nav set up. Maybe explain, Maria, the Bootstrap classes and how we apply those Bootstrap styles, and then we can go ahead and get started on the body of our HTML doc. So I'm going to go ahead and remove my screen and go ahead and bring up the live server.
Okay, so once, let me see. Okay, so once we attach that Bootstrap, your navigation bar should look something like this. Like I say, the clean water, who we are, what we do, get involved, sign up, login. That's just there. Now, if Antoine drags it from left to right, you're going to see the navigation shift from mobile device to regular browser. So it should look something like this. So I'm gonna go ahead and really quickly, we're gonna go over like the divs, the classes. We're gonna add a simple, after we have done doing the navigation bar. Let me know if you guys need a little bit more time. If you guys are set. If not, you can always look at our Git repo and copy it, the beginning of it, and then see how it looks. Okay, now we're gonna go back to Visual Studios. We're gonna drag. Okay, so we'll go down. I'm first gonna do the structure of it, and then we're gonna go adding the CSS and the alignments and everything. And I'm gonna show you how it's gonna look with the regular Bootstrap that you were adding on, and then adding on the whole body of it. So we're gonna do a div under our navigation bar. I'm just gonna add a little comment that's gonna say after the main. Okay, so we're gonna go and type the div. And inside the div, you're gonna hit class, which right now is just gonna be say containers fluent. There we go. Okay, and then we're just gonna put style, which is basically the style of the event. Okay. And then we're gonna add the ID of the class, which is basically gonna, the ID is gonna tell you how the div is gonna look, and the class is gonna let us, basically the ID is gonna tell you, hey, this is what it is, and the class is gonna let us modify it later on to what we design it. Okay, and then I'm gonna just have Antoine write like test so you guys can see on the other live server how it's gonna look. Okay, so as you can see, it's just right now, it's just currently on the top left saying, hey, it's just floating. We're gonna add another div to justify the row and the column to where it's gonna actually go in. So Antoine, if you can go back to VS Code. Okay, so you're gonna write ID class row. And then I'm gonna have him again just so you guys see, write tests under it to see what the difference does once we have it in the live server. So as you can see now, instead of being a little bit more broad, like a little padding on top, it's going to be a little bit more to the left and close to the clean water. Okay, now we're going to add the rows, and then we're just going to put it as the content inside, and we're going to align it to show up in the middle and the bottom, in the middle center. So we're going to add another. I'm just gonna go ahead, guys, and gonna copy the code and then go over it. So what I did. So Antoine, if you can let me go in. Okay, so Anton added a button and then the class. Let's go back into it. So basically, this is without adding the CSS. You can see the join the cause, which is a little button. It has turned into a button and it's in the top left with a little bit padding in the center. So, Anton, do you want to go over it so they can see the button feature? You can see it. We haven't added a lot of CSS to it, but it's there. You can see it's a button. It has a blue hover on it. It's, again, this is just pure HTML without going in and linking the cascade sheet. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and we're going to add the CSS to it so you guys can just see it briefly before we finish adding the body to it, so you can see how we modify the top and the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and right click and put style.css. And then we're going to go back into the index. And we're just going to attach the index. We're going to go back to HTML index. Then under the meta, in the header, so we go ahead and added the Bootstrap CSS, and we're going to add the link, and it's going to be .style.css. Then we're going to go into the style.css cascading sheet. So that's a lot that Antoine just put on. But if you go down, there's going to be like the navigation style, if you can highlight it, which is going to show the background, the navigation styling. That right there, we're going to copy really quick, just that part. You're going to put the dot, which is for the ID, navigation, brand, and then the little brackets, which is which is going to be the font, which we haven't added to, but this is going to be basically the font. We'll go over in a little bit how to add the fonts, but basically the hashtag navigation back, it's going to be the background color. Just highlight that one, Antoine, the navigation styling. I want them to just focus on that part before they see it. So that's basically just going to apply to the ID in the index HTML. So now let's go back to the index HTML.
I'm sorry, where you want me to go?
We're going to go to the index HTML again. And I want to show them where we applying that color to, which is going to be, as you can see, in line 19. We're applying the ID to nav back, which is a color. And then once we go into the live server, it's going to look something like this. Your whole navigation, we applied the CSS to it. It's going to turn blue. So we just apply our first styling to the buttons, everything that has the ID to it. Okay, does anybody have any questions before we continue?
Maria, why don't we take a second to talk about the difference between, well, maybe not the difference between, but the roles that classes play in HTML and IDs,
Yeah.
and how Bootstrap works with classes.
Yeah, of course. Okay. So, okay, so basically the hashtag is the ID. The ID is gonna go to everything that is labeled into the container as ID. Antoine, if you can highlight it. So anything you write in the div with an ID and you put it in the CSS, it's gonna apply to that specific ID. Now, if you put a dot, which if you can go back to the styling cascade, the ID is just going to be added to the specific class of it. Am I like explaining it, Alex, or would you like correctly, or would you like to emphasize of what I'm explaining?
Yeah, I think that was good. I will add one thing, and then I also see another question that I'm actually going to answer. So really, the concept of Bootstrap is basically like a bunch of style sheets put together, or a very long style sheet with a bunch of styles, and those styles are basically grouped into classes. And the way we can apply the styles that Bootstrap gives us in their documentation is by adding the class to the element. So when you look back in our code from our repo and in the code that we're already doing right now in VS Code, you can see, like, for example, in the nav elements that we are applying certain classes. So for example, under the nav, we have li tags, or list items, and we have class equals nav item. Nav item is a class that was created by Bootstrap that's in their documentation, and it knows, basically your code now knows how to style that element based on Bootstrap's documentation. Now, there is one question that I see here that I also want to answer that's also about Bootstrap, is from Siraj, that says, I was a little bit confused on how containers work in Bootstrap. Can someone please explain that concept to me again? So Bootstrap containers it's interesting. So basically, the way that you nest your elements inside of each other when it comes to Bootstrap, you got to make sure you get the syntax right. So this is how it works. Basically, we know about the flex box, or the columns that Maria explained when we had our presentation. Basically, Bootstrap separates it into 12 columns, no matter the size of your screen. So if it's mobile or desktop, you have 12 columns, and they stretch and compress depending on your screen size. And you can pretty much tell your HTML how to use columns based on different screen sizes. Okay. Now, we don't really want to get too much into that, because that's on the documentation, and mobile optimization is really not something that we're going to dive deep into today. But in terms of how containers work themselves, is your container is going to contain a row or rows. The container is basically kind of like a div, but for Bootstrap. That's kind of like the way that I'm going to describe it. And then inside of each row, which is inside of a container, you're going to have columns. So for example, you can have 3 columns, or you can have like col, and basically you can have content in each of those columns. And then what Bootstrap is going to do is it's going to divide the 12 columns by the 3 columns that you made. So for example, each col is going to be 4 columns wide. And you can probably see that through the code that we have on our GitHub. But basically, in essence, it's container. Inside of containers, you have rows. Inside of rows, you have columns. And I think we might, I don't know if we left like a template at the bottom of our HTML or not, but you can kind of see how we have containers set up as we continue with the body. So Maria, we can go ahead and jump back into the body and in the code. You can go ahead and take it.
Okay, so we're gonna go back into the body. Let's go back. I know it's a lot to take, guys, because when we built this ourselves, we had to as well. It's error and trial when you are coming in straight from not knowing CSS or HTML to Bootstrap. It might get a little bit overwhelming, but again, it's all about error and trial. And once you get the concept of it, it's going to be like, wow, this is so easy. Okay, so let's go back to the code, and we are right now. I'm going to go ahead and show you guys how to attach the fonts. I'm just going to quickly paste them. And if you guys have any questions about adding how to find fonts on CSS, you can always go to Web W3 Schools and it'll tell you an explanation how to attach the font to your Cascade sheet, but it's the same thing as we did with the Bootstrap, the CSS. You're just gonna add the link, the stashy, the web link, and it's gonna look like that. And then Antoine, just go ahead and show them how it looks, the fonts, when you attach it. So then it'll look something like this. We modified the clean water and a little bit of how doing the cause. So I'm gonna go ahead and have Antoine put the body. And we're gonna also attach a picture behind the join the cause. Okay, so we're gonna do let me just make sure we're adding into the VS code. It, okay, so we're having a little technical issues, but it's okay, guys. We are all learning. I'm gonna go ahead and skip because the image just for 2 seconds because we need to work the way that this website was built in a team effort, and they added the image through CSS instead of the actual div, which we're going to show you later on different options how to add it. We're going to go back, we're just going to leave that on hold for a second, and then we're going to go into the next div that Antoine just put, which is the search area. So if you go back into the SIG code, you're going to see Anton put a div ID container fluid. And then he added another row inside the container to justify it to align it in the center. Okay, and then we did an ID tab column. which is a column, and then we did 12 because again, Bootstrap follows into 12 rows, and then we put ID, center, test as centering it out. Okay, so I'm gonna show you guys how he added the picture, which I'm not sure why it's not showing it, but they did it through pure CSS. So if you go back, is it showing or no?
Well, for the people who are interested, this is how someone can do it through
I can't hear you. I'm not sure if
Antoine can talk now. He's on stage.
All right, perfect. Hello, everyone. So as you can see, this is how they do it with pure CSS to make sure like your stuff is not too cluttered, because you always want to do clean coding practice. So let me see if I actually got that working now. Sorry, everyone, I have too much tabs open. And one thing is, we'll go over this later on. Sometimes best practice is to go through here. And as I can see, there's nothing telling me any errors. It works. This is the right one, right? Building block, ID, hero select. Oh, now I realize. Because I'm here, current directory. No, that should work.
I see the picture in live server now. I think you got it. Just check it on live server now. Yep, I see it.
Perfect. All right. Sorry about that, everyone.
We can go ahead and keep going now.
Okay, so now you guys see we have the back of the picture. We're gonna go ahead and align join the cost button. So we're gonna go back into our CSS. And we're gonna do like, we're gonna apply this to the class because we just want that button to be aligned. So it's gonna be dot, for those of you that are going back into the CSS, you put dot BTN, which is abbreviation for button. I think this is, hold on, give me 1 second, guys. Which is weird because the button should have been already aligned. So give us one more moment to look at this. There's something we're missing. Let me go back. Antoine, if you can please go back into the index.html.
Give me 1 second. I'm so sorry. Let me put this here so everyone. Nope. Okay. This should be the right one for what we're trying to do. No, sorry. This is the right one.
Okay, so joining class, we forgot to add again the ID, which is like we set up an ID in the CSS. Let's put center test. So right on code line 54, we're gonna go ahead and type ID. I'm gonna just put it in, or if Antoine, do you want to type it in?
Ashley,
I'm gonna go ahead and just add it. So it's gonna be here. It is gonna be the ID test center. And if we refresh it, that join the cost button should be in the center.
Maria, I believe that was a different CSS for a different page because I noticed I forgot to add the stuff to center it.
Okay.
So we guess actually delete this part. The part that I forgot to add everyone was this part where the row, where when it comes to the row, you're able to modify the way stuff are actually presented. So how is row and columns? We did column 12. However, we did justify content center. So with this case, where is the content inside the rows, we're able to put them in the middle of the page and so on. So when we were doing it, I personally forgot to add this part. And because of that, we weren't able to center it. So now that if we look back, it is centered. Um, Why is it still showing that?
Because we need to modify the CSS for the button.
If you want, go ahead and take over. I'll leave there you go, actually. Let me go
Just let them know what you did. Go ahead.
Is it the building block one? Perfect. Okay, sorry everyone. So yeah, like I mentioned, where is it? Up here, sorry. The justify content center and align self center is the way we're able to do that. The justify was more for the horizontal and the align is more for the vertical. So when you want to sometimes center stuff in Bootstrap, you would usually use a row, give them a full column, give them the full access to the grid, and then these two allow it to center inside the container itself. And then with the margin auto, it's just for the margin so that it can adjust for the screen size. And then from there, that's how we were able to center it. And because of how we made this div the container, the hero section was able to then get the image. So as you can see, we did here where we query select ID hero sect, and we gave this particular section all of its property. And because of that, we were able to then set the background to the image that we wanted it to be with these additional property. We make sure it's in the center, that the size is covered, so it covers the whole part, or no overflow when it comes to it. And then for images to work, you always need to give it a width and a height. Is there anything else you'd like me to explain? Or I guess I'll just give it back to Maria.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and from there we added the picture. We're gonna add the search bar. So Anton already did go ahead and did that. It was another, again, it's again container, row, column to justify where you want to align it. How do you want to put it? So we're gonna put again the container. Go back to the screen. So we're gonna go ahead and add the div class, which is a container fluid. Then we're gonna add the by ID justify, which this class right here is gonna allow us to center everything. Then we're gonna put the ID class column 12. Then we're gonna put ID center right here. And then to input a button, I forgot to mention that we need to add another well, the bootstrap's there. That's for buttons. I apologize for that. So we're gonna go ahead and input like the search box, which is gonna be input class. It's gonna put the search box. Then you're gonna put the type. Then you're gonna put the placeholder, which is gonna be this for search of events. And then this is where you're gonna add as basic. When you get more knowledgeable with CSS, you get to input other you get to link other cascade sheets such as icons, buttons. Like I usually use the font. Let me go back. I'm gonna import it really quickly. I use fonts from other sites. I use icon libraries from Awesome. So we're gonna go ahead and link really quickly the icon library. I'm gonna add to the CSS again. And that right there is gonna call the CSS for our body. We go down into the search bar, it's gonna show we're gonna put iClass and then Fafa search, which is gonna show us the icon for it. So if you go back, Antoine, to the live server and refresh it or save it, it should show. It's showing.
Uh, I'm getting it's getting blocked from the request.
Like it's the library, it's not showing now.
It's saying refusing to apply. So sometimes you have to look at these stuff. That's why I mentioned earlier to help with debugging. You sometimes have to go to the inspect, and then it helps you with this development tool. So right now, for some reason, we're getting banned. Let me try this one. Maybe this will enable it. Because sometimes they need the integrity check, which is a hash, an info hash, to help verify if this is the right one. So sometimes that can help with stuff getting blocked. There we go. So it seems like it was getting blocked. I apologize. Go ahead, Maria.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, now we're gonna add the events. So we're gonna go ahead, Antoine, if you want to write it from scratch so they see how we're adding.
Let me make sure to have the right. There you go. Sorry. Okay, so
So if you want to go ahead and do one from scratch so they can see how you type and add everything.
first things first, since we're doing everything with a pretty much a coding block scenario, we're gonna do containers, fluid. This is a particular class that they made to help us. And here is where you're actually able to put inline styling by adding the style attribute to the HTML tag. So for that, we're going to give a padding top 30 pixel. And I would like to give a disclaimer. When you're doing inline styling like this, sometimes you'll have a situation where some of your stuff won't apply in the way you would like it. Sometimes you got to look and see the order of it. For example, when you're making your own CSS on top of Bootstrap, it's always recommended to put your CSS under it. Because if I were to put this on top of it, CSS will override certain fields. I mean, Bootstrap will override certain fields. And by me putting it on the bottom, my CSS overrides Bootstrap's particular fields for certain classes. And then from there, inline ones takes precedence. So as always, we're going to do a row, so div. And then we're going to do class and give it the row class. Content center, have it in the middle. Next, we're going to give it a column. And the reason why we're giving it a column of 10 is that we want the extra 2 columns to be padding for the stuff. For example, the upper one with the justify content center, the extra spacing will be on the left and right hand side. Bootstrap will make sure to divide the available space evenly so that this will be responsive and giving a padding. And then we're going to give it a card attribute. A card is kind of like a paper. So imagine just like a square that's a paper that's on your web page. To just give it more of a on display so you can tell like, hey, this is different, not being part of the background. And this MB, we're going to give it margin bottom 3. So that's what that part means. And then inside this column, we are going to give it a class name row, no gutters, so pretty much no padding. Column, medium display, I'm assuming. Alex, is that correct? This is for medium display?
So basically Bootstrap has what's called breakpoints, and Bootstrap has those breakpoints defined on their documentation. So they have extra small, small, medium, large, and I think maybe extra large screens. So basically, what that means for you guys is when you're making your code, you can basically say, hey, when the screen goes smaller or larger than a specific number, it's going to switch to a medium-sized screen or a large-sized screen. But on a large-sized screen, you might want elements sized differently. But on a small screen, you don't want it that large. You don't want it to take up the whole screen, maybe. Or maybe you do want it to take up a full screen, but then on large screens, you want it to be smaller because you don't want it stretched out super far. So having those classes and breakpoints make your app more mobile responsive and just more flexible overall with different screen sizes.
Perfect. Thank you, Alex. So now for that, next will be div com. And this is giving it a column space of 8. And the objective is, if Alex, if you don't mind, to show the Figma so we can show them what we're trying to create on the web page.
Sure, yeah, no
Oh,
problem.
wow.
Let me go ahead and pull up the Figma real quick. Okay, so what we'll be doing is we're going to be creating the event listings next. So we already created the nav, and we also created what I'm calling, and some people call, the hero image. Hero image being your big image on the front page with like a call to action, which in this case is join the cause, having that search bar that we already made. And next we're going to make these two components. So we're going to make these in separate containers, just because it makes organization a little bit better on the code itself. So basically what these elements are in Bootstrap is it's a card. And like Antoine was explaining, it's almost like another element that sits on top of your page. That's at least the best way to kind of think about it. And normally in Bootstrap, this card is going to have some type of outline, but the Bootstrap class we're using is kind of like a card with an invisible border, and it lets us have a picture component and then a title, paragraph, and a button. So in this case, we're using it for our event details and our RSVP button, and then we're duplicating it. And then none of these buttons are going to do anything today because all we're focused on is creating the UI. And then later on, when we add JavaScript and code in our other sessions, you'll be able to create an event down here, and then another listing will appear, another container will appear. So that's what we're going to go ahead and work on next. Then after that, we'll move to adding our quote and then our footer, and then we can wrap it up for today. But Maria and Antoine, you guys can go ahead and take it with the cards and how we're going to set those up.
Perfect, thank you. If you can send it back to mine. So as you saw, we're working on that. And normally with cards, the image will normally stack up on top, and then on the bottom, it will be describing the card itself. However, our objective was to have it that the image to be to the left. That is why we did the columns, as you can see inside, since the columns are going to be horizontal. So this will be on the left-hand side, and then this will be taking up the remaining on the right-hand side. So from the image that was shown, this is column 8 is where we're going to write all our description tags. So I'm just going to write this last part where it's going to be div class equal to card body. And to give it a title, we're going to give it a header 5. I'm going to give it a class card. And the first one, we're going to give it a day. Coastal Queen. Now, when it comes to the other details that we saw, I know this session is not more about mobile friendly, but just a little insight on it. And I'm just going to copy and paste what we did prior. Is that yes, we could actually add every single one of these into one paragraph tag. However, to give it more of a responsible feeling and have it line by line, this is why we did it like this. Because by default, paragraph tags are very responsive depending on the size, and then they increase the font size accordingly. So that is why we have so many of the same tags out like this. And as you can see, we have the button here to RSVP. As of right now, it doesn't do anything, but on the next, from there, we'll actually add more functionality to it. And that's pretty much how we're going to do our first coding block for events. So let's actually put a comment here, put event 1. I'm going to give a few seconds to answer any questions. Let me get to the chat. Just see if there's any question that needs to be answered. I guess there's no questions as of this time. All right, so since there's no question at this, so we got the image working by just checking the path. Sometimes the live server takes a little time and sometimes it doesn't load it immediately, but how we got it working pretty much was just checking to see if the path was correct. So with using a proper IDE, sometimes like this, if you can see that it actually helps with the URL, like it gives you the path. So as you can see, mine tells me the path of where my project is working in. So for me, that's how I'm able to figure out what is going on. And sometimes too, when it comes to the live server, how I sometimes debug stuff is like this. If I were to go to inspect, you'll see sometimes error message here. And these would be the way of how to troubleshoot. Sometimes it'll tell you resource cannot be found, and so on. Right now, it's giving us this error for one of the stuff that was getting blocked that I mentioned prior with the font awesome, and then I put the new one that was correct. So that's how I was able to troubleshoot and figure out how to do it. All right, is there any other questions? All right, that's the wrong one. Okay, so because of how we already did one, I'm just going to copy what we have for the second event. It's the exact same thing, just different information. So we can put it right under. And as you can see, it's still event 2. Information, just now it was with Jill, I believe. I think it was John Appleseed and Jill Appleseed, if I recall.
Yep, that's right.
Perfect. Sorry about that, everyone. Give me a sec. Why is it not opening up? I'm having some technical difficulties, so I'm going to leave it back to this one. For some reason, my other IDE is not opening up. Maria, would you like to continue?
Sure. Okay. So.
We can't hear you.
Sorry, me and Antoine are in the same room, guys. Okay. So.
Why is it not
You close the.
There you go. Now it's working. Sorry about that. All right. Sorry, I can go back. Okay, so yeah, as we know, you just go back to the live server and see how's that looking. And right now it's because the images are not proper, so I can actually show you how to mess with that. So yeah, see. So actually, this is a perfect example. We are in index, current directory. Oh, that's right, because I closed out the thing because it was giving me issues. Interesting. Sometimes, in a weird way, you just gotta delete it because sometimes I feel this stuff doesn't work when it comes to copy and pasting. This is row 2. Now you see if that will. Interesting. Or it's not even telling me here. Maria, I'm gonna let you go take over for now while I troubleshoot this.
Okay, so where would you like me to pick off? Do you want me to keep off continuing, or do you
Yeah, go ahead and continue afterwards. I'm trying to see if I can
mind
get this part.
sharing the live share again? Because you closed it.
Here you go. Can you see the live share,
No.
Alex?
No, I think the live share just needs to be restarted on VS Code.
Okay.
We just got kicked off of the live share. We saw it on screen fine. It just we just lost connection to the live share. Unfortunately, that live share extension is a little bit buggy and sometimes kicks you off after some inactivity. Just so you guys know, if you want to use it in a group project or something like that. It is developed by Microsoft, so it is supposed to be stable, but it is not actually that stable, unfortunately. So just give us 1 second while we go ahead and get that running, and then we'll go ahead and finish off these cards and then move into the footer.
Let me try to get the session. Okay. Alright guys, try that link. Let me know if it works for you.
Good for me.
Okay, I got it working. Good.
All right, Antoine, you can go ahead and bring up the VS Code back onto the same screen that your live server is on, and we can go ahead and finish off the styling for these cards.
Okay, perfect. So right now I was trying to still figure out what was the issue. Let me see if this works. Interesting. And so it is able to tell, you know. That's interesting. It's not even giving me the error, it's just not showing up. Let me compare it to the ones we did. I don't know if I forgot something. I have image, card image. Well, I'm sorry, everyone. Just to make sure we don't allot all our time to troubleshooting, we're going to just continue on to the next part. So the next part will be actually the create event page. Alex, if you can actually pull up the Figma one more time. So yeah, right there, perfect. So yeah, next part will be that. Where it says that is all for now, and then the create event. As we know for now that is another container on the building block of it, and having the stuff in the center. So what we're gonna do is, let's go back to VS Code. Nope. So after that, we're gonna do another div. Do another block by using container, and then we're gonna do inline padding. So we're gonna do padding top 30 pixel, and padding bottom 30 pixel. Next thing, I'm gonna add the row and justify the content. So if you don't specify a div with a column, by default, it will actually take up the whole row. So that is why we don't need to add it here. We just gotta put that all for now. And then the next part is for the button. And with this now, since we're doing two divs inside the row, it will give them evenly. Actually, I'm sorry, I just misread. So that's gonna be for the first row. And now we're gonna put another row right under this one. We're gonna justify content, center. We're gonna add a div. And this is where we're gonna put our button. And by giving it a button, we can give it a button class and then the button info style. All right, and then just go check it out. What did I do wrong? Have an MS. Maria, am I missing a style that is not putting in the middle?
Let me look at it. Give me 2 seconds. For which line? Tell me what line.
We are currently trying to add the create an event. We're on line 130.
There's like a missing div. Hold on.
That's good.
Are you trying to create the event, or are you trying to add the create the event button?
Well, right now I'm currently stuck where it is not in the middle.
It looks like the issue is because
Missing a div.
it looks like we have a row inside of a row. So I think it's just because the closing tag.
Oh, I see what I did.
Yeah, so that's another thing to watch out for everyone who's watching. A lot of your issues that you have with Bootstrap is either because you have columns inside of columns on accident or rows inside of rows, and you don't want that. It should be containers, and then inside of a container you have rows, inside of rows you have columns. I believe it's not really incorrect to have containers inside of containers, but you usually don't want a bunch of containers inside of containers inside of containers. Like you don't want like a bunch of Russian nesting dolls, and you also definitely don't want rows inside of rows because it's going to create that issue that we just had. So now you can see it's one container, and now that's all for now is in one row, and then create an event is also in its own row. And when you look at the code in VS Code, it overall just looks a bit cleaner. You can definitely tell visually that those rows are separated from each other inside of the fluid container. That's just something to look out for. So that should fix that issue that we were having.
Thank you, Alex, for that. All right, and then the next part is the quote section. So for the quote section, we're going to write, this is, I always like to do this to make sure. Let's go under here. Add another container. Style, inline styling again. Padding top. 30 pixel padding on top. Hopefully we don't make the same mistake again. Class, row, justify. And we're just creating a div to be a low container for now the image. So you'll see it this time if it will work and not give us any issues. Okay. Now let's go check that out. Seems like we're still having that issues for some reason with the images. So let me try this instead.
All you had to do was animate yourself.
Something that I just wanted to bring up real quickly is when I was looking at the code, I did notice that we had a spacing issue with the first event. And there's not, so sometimes you'll look at your code in HTML, especially with Bootstrap, and you'll look at two separate containers that you swear are the same. And sometimes you'll look at it a number of times and you still can't figure out what's wrong with it. And sometimes the best thing you can do is if you have a card in this example that you know is working right, go ahead and copy and paste it and overwrite the one that you have. Sometimes it's as simple as misspelling a class. Sometimes you have accidental rows inside of rows. Maybe you accidentally put a line break somewhere where you did not mean to. So now I have the spacing correct for the two events. And we will go ahead and see why those pictures are not popping up where we want them to.
All right, sorry about that. Just try again. Still not popping up. Interesting. I'm in the building block, that one. Just to not have that warning. I wonder why. I wonder is that issue I remember talking to you about, Alex, that depending on stuff, depending how the application work, sometimes it needs the actual full path and sometimes it doesn't. I wonder if that might be the issue. Let's see if that might work.
You might want to close the live server and like just refresh it. Just close it and open it again. Sometimes it might glitch.
But that's the weird part. It's not even interesting. Yeah, so that's the part we're getting stuck on. For some reason, the image source is not.
Since what might be happening, since I'm trying to add in the path for the source, it's not even populating the possible paths. For the sake of time, since we are about 15 minutes out, why don't we go ahead, Antoine, and pull up the index that we have in our repo, because at this point, the content that we have in the index that we've been working on is pretty much exactly the same to the one that we have on our repos, except for the fact that the image at the bottom in our footer, the footer we have not done yet. So yes, the hero image is not working because of the custom CSS that we haven't put in, but look at the cards. The cards should look something like that. We do have the stock image that we're using on the left-hand side of the card with the same details. The button was styled correctly in our index, but something's going wrong with the pictures, and we think it's something to do with the live share feature that we're using, which is full of bugs. But let's go ahead, Antoine, and show them the code for this footer image here to kind of see how we have that set up. And then we can quickly look through how to set up your footer in an HTML doc with the Bootstrap. And then we can close out to see if anyone has any questions. So let's quickly go to that, and we'll just use the index in our full stack series folder from here on out until the end.
All right. Okay, so as of right now, this is what we have for the footer, if I recall correctly. Let me open this up so I can talk about the code. And let's go back to the code. All right, perfect. Okay, so for how we're doing this, by default, I believe is that for the medium, anything that's a medium-sized screen or above is going to be 3 columns, and so on. And then anything smaller, they'll be their own. So for how that's why we're doing this. As we always know, this is then the part to make it into a container, inline styling to give it a little extra padding. Now this is the footer class. The footer class just makes it that like you're able to label stuff correctly, and also for footer, you are able to actually add stuff to make it sticky. For example, you can actually have the footer all constantly be showing while the upper part is scrolling if you would like. From there, we added this part, which is the little contact information. Like I said, it's a 3 column. Same thing for here. 3 columns. We're centering the icons. And with the font awesome that Maria mentioned, This is how we're able to get these icons for Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and get them a little font size to be a little bigger. Next is then the last section over here for this part. And if I were to inspect, change it to a mobile, a smaller size, as you can see, it will stack up because now the smaller ones take up 12 columns. And because rows are only 12 columns, they will then go under each other. So that is how we are able to get this part to be into like so.
Antoine, can you show the
Oh,
screen with the browser so you
sorry.
can see that?
Sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
So as you can see, this is how it will look with the mobile. And like I was saying earlier with the columns, since it was 12, because how you cannot fit more than 12, they will stack up upon each other. And that's how this is done. So technically this is one row, but because of the columns, then they become their own row. And if we actually go through and see how we did it, you can see that this is now more responsive, just like how we would like it to be.
And go ahead and quickly show them how the nav button with the hamburger menu works on the mobile.
So yeah, that's how we have it for the nav.
And that is all courtesy of Bootstrap, pretty much.
Okay, that is weird. Oh, that's
it's taking you to the other pages that we've created.
yeah.
So that's pretty much what Bootstrap is going to be doing when you change screen sizes using the breakpoints, which we wanted to mention, but we didn't want to dive too deep in since mobile responsive web design could be its own workshop in itself. So that is how we did the cards. We already went over the part that says that's all for now, create an event, the picture, and then Antoine, could you just quickly go back to the code again for the footer and just kind of show how we have that set up with Bootstrap and the background and stuff like that?
For this part you're talking about? The quote part?
Yeah, we have the quote picture, which is pretty simple, right? We have the div, and then we specified the path of the source of the image. It is in its own container with its own row. For organizational purposes, we do have a container for each part of the web page. And then Antoine, if you could scroll down a little bit, we do have the footer. The footer, like I explained earlier, is you're going to find this on most sites, right? Sites at the bottom are going to have their name, a contact number, a contact email, social media links, things like that. So we went ahead and did that. And we have a container, a row. And like Antoine was explaining, we have basically what we have is where it says on line 185, we have div class equals :12 :md -3. So basically what that means is when you're on any screen size that is smaller than a medium screen, that div is going to use 12 columns. And in each row, you can only have 12 columns. And now you might be thinking, okay, but all of those divs are in a single row. So how does it fit? But like Antoine explained, whenever anything is 12 columns wide, even if there's other things in the row, 12 columns fills up an entire row. So it just kicks the next thing to its own row. So basically anything smaller than a medium-sized screen is going to take up the full row. So the clean water, the number, the phone number will all be on its own row, nothing to the side of it on screens smaller than medium. Once you go above the medium breakpoint and go to a larger screen, then the information, the icons, and the copyright clean water co will appear next to each other and share the space. And you can see that because medium 3, medium 3, medium 3, that equals 9. And then you do have some padding on each side. That way it's not all the way on the side of the screen. Antoine, if you could go back to the page again and show expanding from mobile to full screen, and then you can kind of see how that works again. So you can kind of, yeah, you can actually scroll down to the bottom footer again, actually. And so you see each of those divs take up, I believe we just said 3. So all of those divs equal 9. And then we have 3 columns worth of padding on the left and right hand side. And then Bootstrap centers each of those divs in the entire row that we have available. So that is pretty much how we have that footer. If you want to go ahead and pop back into the code, we can go ahead and check to see if there is anything else that we need to go over. You can scroll down a bit. So we have the last part of the code is the Bootstrap imports, right? So like we explained in the beginning, we go to the Bootstrap documentation, and it does tell you what you have to import in order to make Bootstrap work. So back to the Bootstrap documentation that I went over before, using the link that's in the resource doc, it does take you to a page and go to the getting started. We already put the CSS style sheet in the top, and that's where our style sheets normally go in HTML. Then we also have the Bootstrap bundles, which are usually JavaScript, jQuery, things like that. Mostly they're JavaScript plugins that make things work, like our buttons, like our hamburger menu on our nav bar, things where when you press something on the page, something happens, and that's exactly what these components do. So when we pop back over to the code, that's where the Bootstrap imports are. We have the Bootstrap jQuery, and the popper and JS, everything that we need in order to make all of the Bootstrap components work. That way, no matter what Bootstrap component you import from the documentation, you know that everything is going to work correctly as described in the documentation. So we have about 7 more minutes. We went ahead and already completed everything. We did have issues with the pictures, but everyone who's watching should not have the same issues we did because we are using live share. And unfortunately, like we described earlier, there are some bugs with it. So I want to take these last few minutes to answer any questions that anyone might have. I know we went pretty quick. We introduced a lot of different concepts, HTML for the first time, CSS, and Bootstrap. And all of these 3 things might be kind of overwhelming for the first time, especially in a time frame less than 2 hours. So if anyone has any questions specific about Bootstrap, HTML, CSS, why we designed our website the way we did, or any issues you may have run into, we'd be happy to quickly answer those in the last 5 minutes. So if you have any questions, please drop them into the YouTube chat. I'm watching that right now. If we don't have any questions, I'm going to quickly mention the solution challenge again. While we're waiting for those of you who do have questions. If you are interested in participating in the Solution Challenge, it is a global competition hosted by Google for developer student clubs and members of developer student clubs. You do have to be a member of a developer student club in order to register and participate. However, if your club does not, if your university does not have a developer student club, you can join UCF Developer Student Club or another developer student club that is nearby to you. DSCs is global, so if you are not in the US, there are DSCs all over the world. So join the one that is near you. The solution challenge is basically, like I described earlier, to pick a problem among those 17 SDG UN goals and try to find a solution to some of those problems using at least one Google technology. And through this entire workshop, we're going to basically make this UI work using some backend technologies later down the road. But next week, we're going to go over JavaScript and React, which is a little, it's a bit more modern of a technique to making a web page rather than typing out all the HTML, CSS, and working with the nuances of Bootstrap. using frameworks like React, JavaScript frameworks, is a lot easier when making more web pages and dynamic content, user responsiveness and interactivity is a lot easier to create. So that's what we'll be going over next week. I do see a couple things popping up in the YouTube chat. Fabio did say we'll be posting additional exercises in Discord to reinforce you guys' learning for HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap tonight, courtesy of Fabio. So we'll have kind of little mini exercises for those of you who are interested in learning more, practicing more on some of the skills that we went over today. I know it's a lot of content. Let's see. Can we also ask questions about workshops in Discord if we have any later on? Of course you can. You can always ask questions about any of the content we went over today, developer technologies in general, or about workshops that we might have in the future. This is going to be a weekly series every Sunday, except for the weekend of Valentine's Day, which we're doing on a Friday. So keep your eye out, and we will be posting details about next week's session very shortly. Let's go ahead and see another question. Can absolute beginners join the UCF Developer Student Club? Of course. And the best part is you don't even have to be a computer science major or a computer engineering major to join the UCF Developer Student Club. It is open to all majors, any person who is interested in continuing their learning on anything and everything developer technologies. So of course, absolute beginners can join the Developer Student Club, and it is free to join. Just pop in our Discord whenever you want, and that's how we can stay in the loop. A couple other questions. Let's see. UCF Developer Student Club is open to any and all levels. Suraj says, thank you, no problem. And we have another question. What is the difference between a website and a web app? That's a great question. So we are making a web app throughout this series. And what a web app is it's basically like a website you can go to, but it has functionalities that an application does. Maybe functionalities that an application might on mobile, or maybe functionalities that other apps might have on desktop apps. So basically, let me kind of break that down in a non-technical way real quickly before we end off. So you could design a web page in HTML, CSS, and Bootstrap, and that's just going to be a static web page. It has a design, and it looks great. It has buttons that you can click, and it takes you to links or does stuff, but when you want to do more advanced features like creating events, editing events, and all that data has to be saved somewhere in a backend of some kind. And we're going to be utilizing Firebase and Flask and a bunch of other things because all that data that you are putting into the website or taking out of the website has to be stored somewhere. And it's not just magically stored in your HTML file. It has to go somewhere. And a lot of different things that you add in, like Google Maps API and different APIs that we'll be going over in a later session. If you don't know what APIs are, you have to add those into your site in order to add some of these more advanced features and functionalities. So that's really the difference. Website is just a front end, looks great, there's links, and a web app can handle user input and do something based on that input. That's the difference. And the web app is a very popular way to create different application platforms, especially nowadays, because we have so many different easy developer technologies to learn. So, the days of everything being a desktop app or a mobile app is no more. But a lot of the times now people are creating a web app version and a mobile app version of some type of app that they're creating. But web app development is very easy once you get the hang of it. And next week when we go over JavaScript and React, it'll probably be a little bit easier to recreate components and things like that. So without giving away all the secrets of next week's session, I will go ahead and end it off there. I don't see any other questions. So for those of you who attended and stuck with us to the end, thank you. For those who came in late, there is going to be a recording of today's session that we'll post on our YouTube very shortly after this live stream is done. If you have any questions, drop them in our Discord. We put a ton of resources on our Google Doc. If you don't have the link to that, we emailed it out to everyone who RSVP'd. We'll drop it in the Discord as well after this event so you can check it out. Lots of free resources, videos, blogs, a bunch of things like that. So that is it for today. Thank you all for coming, and I will catch you all later. Everyone wave. Catch you all later. Thanks for coming.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.